Hey there. Welcome again to the Struggle Well Read Along. It's week two. It is 7:30 p.m. here where I live. I'm not sure what time it is where you are tuning in, but we are going to take a look again at the wonderful book that Ken and Josh have written called Struggle Well: Thriving in the Aftermath of Trauma. Last week we looked at the introduction. This week, chapter one. And chapter one has a really great title. Struggle is a terrible thing to waste. So I think that's a great title. There's good content. Josh shares his story in chapter one, which I think is really great to check out, to learn from. And I think it's very important as well for authors of a book like that to show some of their own vulnerability before they ask us to dig into ours. So I really like that they shared accordingly. Again, when this Facebook Live is happening, if you have questions, comments, want to just say hey from wherever you are, please feel free. I'd love to know who's tuning in. And if you have questions for Josh, for example, or for Ken, I am sure, and they have said that they will very much be willing to answer them. And I can share those answers here in the comment section after I've posted this video or in subsequent weeks as well. And hopefully upcoming in this read-along series, I will have either or both Ken and Josh joining me, which would be amazing too. I have finally learned a way that I could have more than one person on this, even if we're not in the same location. So I'm looking forward to having them on this broadcast series as well. Before I dig into the book, I just wanted to share, I had a comment from Beverly Cook on the event page for this read along, and she pointed out something that I wasn't aware of that I think would be very helpful if you're interested. She said that it would be beneficial for you to listen to Ken and Josh speak on the All Marine Radio. They speak with the host Michael McNamara, I believe his last name is, or otherwise known as Mac. And they had this conversation on May the 2nd, 2018. And Beverly says that the easy way to find this conversation between Ken, Josh, and Mac on allmarineradio.com would be to search for Struggle Well once you get to that website. So again, it's allmarineradio.com, which I can put in the comments after this broadcast. And if you search for Struggle Well, you can find this conversation with Ken, Josh, and Mac, which Beverly says would probably be a good way to enhance your experience of Struggle Well, the book, the roadmap that Ken and Josh have laid out for us, etc. So I just wanted to make sure that I make that kind of before I start, and I'd like to thank Beverly as well. I know that is something I want to check out. So that's really great. And again, if you have other things to share or things that you think might be helpful for people tuning in, feel free to do it. I really want this to be a community exercise and experience, and not just all about me and me talking. I really like to make this a group effort, and that we are all able to share, show some vulnerability if necessary, share our stories if we want, talk about what we get the most of from the book, key takeaways, things that we've learned or are trying out for ourselves. So I'm always willing to hear what you have to say. Oh, and there's Ken writing in tonight. That's awesome. Hi, Ken. Hello. He says, hope you have a great audience tonight. I'm sure I'm here if you have any questions. There we go. So if you have any questions for Ken, please make sure to ask them. So let's dig into the book, shall we? As I said, I'm using a Kindle. I'm very much into having it nice and compact in my hand that I can take with me anywhere. So that's the version I have. And so because of that, as I told you last week, I'm able to take some notes and make some highlights. And so I save them. And then when I'm on this broadcast with you, I like to kind of dig in to them and share what I've learned and what my key takeaways are, and hopefully hear from you what yours are as well. So as I said, from chapter one is called Struggle is a Terrible Thing to Waste. I think that's such a great title and a great way to start off the book, because as we've talked about, as I shared last week, the book is about, of course, struggling well and taking struggle and finding like the gems in the struggle and actually living well based on it, taking what we learn from it and not letting it, hold us back from growth, from opportunity, from our potential, etc. So having that title as chapter 1, I think, is really great. So the first thing that I highlighted when I was reading chapter 1 is that in chapter 1, they share Josh's story with you, which I mentioned, a co-author of the book, because by disclosing our struggles, we remove the barriers that keep us from connecting deeply to one another and helping each other grow. I really like that. This is something that I have believed for quite a long time since I first came out with my story, is that once you disclose, once you share it with someone that you trust, someone who's willing to listen, there's this feeling of, like they say here, there's barriers that come down that allow you to connect with others, that allow you to be more open, and help you to grow. I remember once I told my story, and then other men around me, when I was co-facilitating that support group in Toronto, when we started telling our stories, sharing our stories, we were able to connect with each other better. We were able to start our journey of healing, of growth, of digging in, because we kind of, I remember someone described it as, your story is kind of like this like kind of big rock, or this big heavy load on your back or your shoulders, and once you kind of tell somebody, it feels like that is not necessarily fallen away and disappeared, but it doesn't feel as heavy as anymore. You don't feel the shame and the guilt and all that that's attached to that kind of burden on your back. You're able to put it kind of out in the open for someone else to either help you, to you, and the shame, the guilt, and all that, I think it subsides a little bit. And when those barriers are removed, then you're able to kind of take your first step and your next step and towards growing. And so I think that's a really awesome kind of call out that they have in this first chapter, that I've also mentioned in the beginning, that by Josh and Ken being vulnerable and sharing their stories in this book, it also allows us to connect with them, with maybe other people, and be vulnerable ourselves and digging in to this roadmap that they've created for us in the book. So I really appreciate that. So the other highlight that I put in for me for chapter 1 was what they found. So they're talking about the doctors who studied, researched, and came up sort of with this idea of post-traumatic growth, which I also think is a great term. It's actually why I first reached out to Ken, because when he was speaking, he had on his slide post-traumatic growth, and I was like, oh, I like that. I need to talk to this man. And so what he says here about these two guys who came up with this is, what they found is that people who possess true wisdom are those who have suffered. And that's a big statement. On my Kindle, it's a very kind of small sentence, but it's a very much bigger than those words. That when you suffer, when you struggle, there's a true wisdom that comes from that experience. And it's hard for us, I think, to accept that fact. There's a lack of confidence that we often have, that we are, the shame that I mentioned, and guilt, and to think of ourselves that way is, I think, difficult for some of us. And as I said, I don't want to miss anything that's coming up in the comments. So Ken has added here, shame cannot withstand the spoken word. It's a relief in general to get this off of our backs. So true. That, like, relief to get that burden off of our backs. And there's something to putting your story to words and putting it out there into the world. And I encourage anyone who might be seeing this broadcast or during, that if you have not considered telling your story to someone, maybe find that at least one person that you can trust that would be willing to listen, not judge you, not interrupt, and just listen to you and hear what you have to say and what you're struggling with. It makes a huge difference. Made a huge difference for me. It's how I've started my journey. It's how I started digging in and learning how to improve my life, so that this burden, big kind of weight that I had, was not going to just hold me and keep me down for my entire life. That's something that nobody wants to have. So this thing about wisdom is so interesting, because in terms of being vulnerable, I can share with you that lately it's been difficult for me on the confidence side of things, feeling confident enough to succeed in some of the projects I'm doing, some of the ideas that I have. And it's sometimes difficult for us to believe in ourselves. And so when I was reading this and thinking about how I'm struggling with confidence, I was like, oh, this is so interesting that the suffering has given me a certain kind of true wisdom that I might not have acquired otherwise. I have learned so much about empathy, about learning about other people, about connecting and human connection. I've learned ways, new coping skills, and ways to approach the pain, the struggle that I maybe never would have if I hadn't had this struggle. And so again, back to the title of chapter 1, it's a terrible thing to waste the struggle. If we really dig in, if we really explore what's going on in our feelings and how we're reacting or responding to things, we'll get we'll gain wisdom. We will gain not just experience but wisdom. And I think that's a really great note, and that's why I highlighted that in chapter 1. So another note for me from the chapter 1, it feels a little weird for me to say that because we did the introduction last week and it's week 2, but it was chapter 1. So sorry if I might slip up a bit. I know I did already in one of my Facebook posts about this. But other thing that that stood out for me is talking again about these researchers and how they had noticed that people who were prisoners of war or had severe disabilities after coming back from war or something like that still were able to thrive. And one thing I liked here that I highlighted as well is as they listened to the voices of those who had experienced traumatic events and had come out wiser on the other side, Tedeschi and Calhoun discovered 5 specific domains in which they saw growth. And then the next part I really loved. These are the treasures you collect in your abyss. So that is a really great line, that you can definitely feel that when you're struggling and you have dealt with trauma, that there is like this abyss that you totally fall into. You kind of look up and you might see a spark of light. You might not. It's very dark. It feels lonely. It's very constricting, etc. But this whole sort of focus of this book is that there are treasures down there. There are gems to pull out. There's wisdom to pull out. There's experience. There's learning. There's growth. There's so much. There's a deeper human connection. And I think it's a very difficult thing for us to change our thinking and our perspective to that. I believe when you're really cases of trauma, like for example, if you're a first responder or someone in the military or something, it could be very difficult to have that perspective and think like, there's gems in this, like there's treasures here. But I think if we don't think that way, if we don't approach it that way, we're just going to always feel that weight is on our shoulders and holding us down and preventing us from being who we really are meant to be. So I really like that you are finding treasures in the abyss. That should actually be like a t-shirt or something, because it's a really good way of thinking about struggle. And so in chapter 1, they kind of outline what these treasures would be, and deeper relationships, which we've mentioned already, is very much a very real gem that I have taken from my struggle. The people that I've met who have also struggled, who have also experienced similar trauma to me, the way that we have shared the authentic, real conversations that we have had and support that we have given each other, it obviously creates deeper relationships. And I have one friend who reached out to me recently because of some triggers and some struggle. And I remember he has said over the course of many years that because of the sharing that we had based on our trauma and our struggle, that we are friends for life. And I really love that, because it's not always easy to do that, to have people who will stick with you, support you, be willing to listen to you at any time throughout your entire life. But I believe that because of the struggle and being in the abyss like I was, being in the abyss like he was, and connecting, that our relationships definitely are a lot deeper than they might have been without that. So I like that as one of the gems. And personal strength. It's funny, again, going back to like the confidence, the way that we view ourselves. Like Josh said in his story, he found it really difficult to look in the mirror for an extended period of time. and it's difficult for us to see ourselves with the potential that we have, that the good in ourselves. And so this personal strength thing is a really interesting piece too, because a lot of people, when I've shared my story, a lot of people are shocked. They're like, this has happened to you, but you seem so together. Those kind of statements that you're like, like, like nobody's really together. So to say that is a little bit funny, but to have these people have like strong reactions and they say, oh my God, you are so strong. And I always get a little uncomfortable with that. Sometimes it's been a little awkward for me. And then I realized, like, wait a second, yeah, there's personal strength, there's resilience that has been very evident and there in my life to be able to get myself, out of the abyss and to be able to kind of lift my shoulders up again and walk proud and strong and learn to grow and learn to dig in and be vulnerable. There definitely is personal strength involved there. So kudos to anyone watching as well who is also doing this struggle. Like there is a strength in what you're doing. There's personal strength that you're pulling from inside you that you should be proud of, that you, I think, should acknowledge. I shouldn't say should. I don't want to should at anybody, but I recommend like to just sit and contemplate that and go like, wait a second, like this is not easy, and I should recognize that and just kind of maybe reward yourself for that. I'm a big believer in when you're going through struggle and you succeed in the next step or maybe a few steps along, that you kind of reward yourself with something nice or a little bit of self-care to kind of keep that momentum going and to just stop and give yourself the pause to go, I did it. I succeeded in that next little step. I am a little bit further than I was 1 month ago, 2 months ago, for example. I think that's a very important a piece to consider. Another gem that I like here was the spiritual and existential change that you will have. Whether you are a religious person or not, I believe that there's a kind of a meaning to life that we can connect to that sometimes we ignore and sometimes we kind of don't pay attention to. And so this is something that has happened to me, is in going through the struggle, pulling myself out of the abyss, I see there's a lot more meat in life for me to grab a hold of and take advantage of and enjoy. Another thing is a sense of appreciation for life. That is definitely something that has happened for me. I am very much aware of how lucky I am at times, and some great experiences I'm allowed to, not I should say allowed to have, but am able to have, and I appreciate that. Like that photo in the background was taken on a trip to Greece, and not everybody gets to go to Greece. Maybe not everybody wants to, but it's such a nice, fortunate experience that I had, and I super appreciated being able to do something like that. And I think if I had still had, that terrible trauma kind of weight on my shoulders, maybe I wouldn't be in a frame of mind or a financial state where I would have been able to do something like that and have that appreciation show. I think that's important too. And the last gem was new possibilities. I have lost count a long time ago over all of the possibilities that have come my way because of telling my story, digging in, and making steps to grow and struggle through this. So the next highlight that I have, and again, if you have any that you'd like to share or any comments, questions that ever put in there in the comments, I'm paying attention. The deeper relationships, personal strength, spiritual and existential change, appreciation for life, and new possibilities. These are treasures you collect as you walk the road from struggle to strength. They represent wisdom. They are what life is all about. It's a really eloquent, nice, but also simple way of explaining that you collect these treasures as you walk the road from struggle to strength. I really like that because for years since I have started to dig into my trauma and the effects of PTSD, I have always kind of looked at it as steps, and I've said to some of my friends when they're struggling, I'm like, like think sometimes maybe just baby step, like today you did one little thing, better than zero, right? Because you can maybe think of it, even if you do one step forward every week, that's 52 steps in a year. That's not bad. There's quite a few people who make no steps forward in a year and are kind of stuck in limbo. So stop as again, I'd like to just, say again, like pause and reflect on your steps forward and think of it as a walk from struggle to strength, that it is continual, that it might go up and down, it might wind around a road, there might be potholes at times or things you trip over, but that's life, right? Like it's not really like we have a choice. Like struggle comes whether we want it to or not. So how do you respond? Let me go back into my notes again here and see what else from chapter 1 stood out for me. And just gonna go here to the next one. Okay, here we go. So this one's a bit longer. Forgive me for this one, but as again, these things stand out for me and I want to capture them. One of the greatest acts of service we can perform, for another human being is the sheer act of listening. Listening deeply allows the other person to be honest and share their story with you. Listening well requires that you set aside all other distractions, suspend judgment, get present, and ask probing and respectful questions rather than offer advice. That little piece there should be like set out to like everybody should be like in your email signature, should be like and that is such a big statement and such an important piece. It's just so funny, eh? Like we have two ears and one mouth, but which one do we use the most? We found it so hard to do like good, effective, active listening. And it's such a powerful gift to give to someone, is to listen well and pay attention. And as it says here, suspend judgment. Like I find that really difficult. I'm human. I find it really difficult sometimes to listen to someone, hear what they're saying, and not be like in my mind going a bit judgy and thinking, oh my God, like really? It's difficult for us to do that. But what a gift it is to give to someone and to be present. So I got my phone here so I can demonstrate how a lot of people listen today. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. Sorry, what? Mm-hmm. Right? How many people, hands up, have had that experience, and how many of us, also hands up, have done that to other people? This in front of your face means you're not actively listening to the other person and you're not present with them. And this is so difficult these days. We are in the land of device addiction and infobesity, and it's difficult. But I really love how it says this here, like set aside distractions like a phone, suspend judgment, get present, and ask probing questions and meaningful questions as well. These are all like the kind of pieces of empathy that I really love too, that you are being curious about what someone tells you and probing questions, not just surface level things. This is what frustrates me about Canadians talking about the weather so much. Like we have another blizzard today, but aren't there other things to talk about? It's wintertime. We should expect this snow. But I feel like it's just a safe way for us to avoid these things that really matter and these authentic conversations and topics that go deeper and connect us in a deeper level. So I love this. Greatest act of service we can perform for another human being is the sheer act of listening. End of story. Like, fantastic. Totally agree. And I know it's difficult. I'm always trying to get better at this, but I try my hardest to be present and listen to people. And the last piece, I don't want to miss this before I go into the next note too, is probing and respectful questions rather than offer advice. So difficult, right? Like there's a really great little animated video on Brene Brown's kind of discussion on empathy versus sympathy. And she makes kind of a joke on that. We love to give people advice. Like it's like our thing. And it's so difficult to hold that back. But if you can do so, it will help that other person to come even more forward with their story, be more vulnerable, and connect deeper with you. So again, try to do that with people. Another thing that I've put here is that the 5 phases of post-traumatic growth that allow you to walk from on the road from struggle to strength are education, regulation, disclosure, a positive news story, and service. So again, in chapter 1, they're outlining and sort of laying the foundation for the rest of the book and giving you some of the gems or treasures that come from being in the abyss, and then some of the phases of post-traumatic growth, which I thought were really good. And I read them and thought about them and thought like that, this is totally making sense to me. Um, the regulation, of course, is a big one for many of us. We are so often on autopilot. We are triggered and we have so many things that are thrown at us and people say these things and those types of things that are difficult for us to hear maybe, and to be able to have like to self-regulate and keep ourselves balanced and calm is not easy, but super important to do. So I really like these phases, and I'm looking forward to the subsequent chapters of this book to learn more about it. So I think I have just one more note from this chapter. Let me just confirm that. And actually, no, that was the last one. And again, I don't want to keep anyone too long. It's almost a half an hour already. I can't believe it. I'd like to thank Ken for jumping in on this for us. If you're watching, again, like I said, if you're going to watch this recording after the fact and you put a comment in, I will still see that and be able to reach out to Ken or Josh if they have answers. I do put this up on all my social media channels and YouTube so that anyone, anywhere, hopefully can access this. But I'm really happy about having this book, and I'm so looking forward to it. I'm already into the next chapter, and I just see it being so practical, makes so much sense, and it's based on some very good research and experience that Ken and Josh both have. So I think that's a really, really great resource for anyone who has had trauma and is struggling to figure out how to live and improve their life based on their experience. So far so great for me. Hope the same for you. And always reach out and let me know what you're thinking. And thanks for joining. Thanks for watching. If you're watching after the fact, after the live broadcast. And again, appreciate you coming and spending some time with me. And I will see you next Wednesday for chapter 2, where we dig in a bit further. And I do believe that chapter 2 includes Ken's story. So look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers and struggle well.